can everybody see my screen? Okay, and hopefully this will work well. It was the best of times, it was the worst of times. It was the age of wisdom, it was the age of foolishness. And of course, that was Dickens back in the 19th century after the French Revolution. And I think our post-pandemic world is maybe similar to what Dickens was writing about in A Tale of Two Cities. There certainly can be some comparisons. The pandemic 2 years ago kind of looked like this, and everything was doom and gloom. Nobody knew where we were going, and we are still writing this story. But I don't think that's the lesson that we should take away from the pandemic. Of course, Nietzsche had the view that what doesn't kill you makes you stronger, and maybe those are not good words for right now. But anyway, I think this is a better picture for the pandemic. We have survived, we are stronger, and in my opinion, we're better. We've learned an awful lot about how to manage these kind of infectious diseases. We've learned a lot medicine-wise, and I think there's a lot to be positive about, a lot to be optimistic about going forward. And even though there is bad news every day when you turn on the television, I urge you to do what I've done and turn off the news and look elsewhere. But I embrace the capital city village vision, and I'm not sure if it's your motto, but on your website, I think it says that you're dedicated to all things elders and providing for a better future. And that's exactly what Be Well is all about. When I transitioned from medical oncology over to geriatrics, it was with the idea that the burgeoning elder population wants to age well, age successfully, and do so at home. And that's exactly what Capital City Village endorses. It's certainly what Be Well endorses. And so with that, I'm gonna share a few different aspects, a little bit of my story, and I'm gonna touch on the blue zones again. I suspect most of you have heard about the blue zones. And the Blue Zones is a National Geographic project headed up by this guy, Dan Buettner. He's an explorer that continues to this day endorsing the Blue Zone ideology. And the project that he headed up became known as the Blue Zones, and they first published it back in 2004, The Secrets of Living Longer. And basically, they went around the globe and they tried to identify where people were living the longest. And they identified 5 zones, including Sardinia, Italy, Okinawa, Japan, Icaria, Greece, Nicoya, Costa Rica, and the last one you may remember from the introduction, Loma Linda, California. Loma Linda is where I went to medical school. And so I was exposed to the Blue Zones early on. I'm embarrassed to say that I did not embrace those lessons early on. It took me a little bit of aging, so to speak, to finally embrace the Blue Zone lifestyle. But these are the 9 lessons that we learned from those centenarians in the Blue Zones. And I won't go through all of them today. But these 9 lessons, I can say, helped save my life and is part of the reason that I'm with you today. The purpose, number 2 lesson on the Power 9 is what I want to emphasize today. From a clinical standpoint, we have got mounting evidence about the importance of purpose in successful aging. Here, Cohen et al., they demonstrated that purpose in life and its relationship to all-cause mortality and cardiovascular events was positively correlated. And then Hill demonstrated that purpose in life is a predictor of mortality across all adulthood. And then more recently, in 2019, and I'm just going to refer to Dr. A et al., published Association Between Life Purpose and Mortality Among US Adults Older Than 50 Years. And what they did was they looked at nearly 7,000 adults, and they looked at their life purpose, and they showed that a strong purpose was correlated with decreased all-cause mortality as compared to those with a weak purpose. And the study demonstrated that life purpose is a modifiable risk factor, and as such should be something that we should be advocating for. And as a physician, as a geriatrician, this is something that I like to advocate for, but it's probably more preaching than anything to the members and the families that I see and work with every day. Here are a few of my centenarian friends that I had the opportunity to visit on their birthdays. This is Clinton and Bob here. This was in Wisconsin when I was visiting his senior living community. And then this was at the Atria just last month. I was visiting another of Betty's neighbors, and Betty and her daughter came down the hallway, and they were celebrating Betty's 100th birthday that day. And I can tell you with certainty that every one of the elders in my practice either demonstrate positive purpose, what the Nicoyans call plan de vida, a reason to get out of bed, either in the positive or the negative. And it does affect their aging and whether or not they're doing it successfully or not. Now, as a physician, of course, there's a little bit of narcissism. So I'm on to my favorite part of the talk, and that's me. And anyway, my story, some of you may have heard this, and I'll briefly remind you, dates back to 2008, at least a significant part of it, a life-changing event. This was me in March, enjoying spring break with my family off the coast of Miami. And we were fishing, and this man here, me, looks okay, but in fact, he was very ill. I was very ill that day. And 1 month later, I found myself in a rehabilitation hospital recovering from a stroke. And as you can imagine, that altered my life quite dramatically. And it was at that point that I was able to adopt the Blue Zones lifestyle and get healthy. And it was largely because of the purpose in my life. And I'll introduce you to my wife. This is Gwenda. This was taken again off the coast of Miami just about 3 months ago. And she is the primary purpose in my life. And here's another picture of her. She told me after my stroke, well, we tried it your way. That didn't work so well. Now we're going to do it my way. And even though I was kicking and screaming, I knew I had to go along because otherwise I couldn't survive. And so with her help, I was able to adopt the lifestyle of the Blue Zones and finally get healthy and survive. Anyway, I'll point out on this picture, I don't know if you can see my pointer, but she and I were able to hike to this point, a couple hundred feet above the waterfall in the background. And I'll reference that here in a moment with another picture. But anyway, again, these Power 9 lessons from the centenarians of the Blue Zones are partly responsible for my survival. My wife, Gwen, helped me adopt these rules, and I apply them every day. And I think that the blue zones is something that I would encourage every one of us to look at. There's things that we can learn, things that certainly all of us can benefit from. And I encourage you to look up their website. Now, these pictures of Gwen and me, these were taken in October, and I'm very proud of this because this was on a hike, and we started at sea level, and that waterfall was about 1,500 feet elevation. And I was proud of myself because I was able to do that with her help. And this was us at the very end, and you can see the sun setting in the west. And when we started this hike, they told us, well, you'll need about 4 hours. And so we got there at about noon. Sun was setting about 6:30, thinking we had plenty of time. And unfortunately, fortunately, we just barely beat the sun, and we were able to get off the mountain before it got too dark. But anyway, this is one of my favorite pictures from that trip. Because I was successful on that hike. Thank you to Gwenda and my trusty hiking stick. So anyway, the purpose that I have with my wife and also with Be Well, both Be Well MD and Be Well Clinical Studies, allows me to get out of bed every day and find a reason to keep marching forward. Certainly back 14 years ago at that health event, I wasn't sure what was going to happen. And having that purpose certainly was beneficial to me. Now, as we fast forward and as I have matured as a geriatrician and made it my purpose now to treat elders and try to find a better way forward in the world of geriatric. One thing that has become very obvious to our current medical environment is RSV, respiratory syncytial virus. Prior to the pandemic, was one of the World Health Organization's primary foci in order to, or trying to develop a vaccine against RSV. And let me tell you a little bit about RSV. It's one of the most common respiratory viruses that causes bronchitis and pneumonia. And it is a virus that affects not only the infants and the babies, that's where it's most commonly seen, but it also affects elders. And it's one of the most common causes of pneumonia and death in elders. And the search for a vaccine stretches way back to the 60s. Back in the 60s, following the success with smallpox and polio vaccines, they thought that RSV was going to be next. And as they went through the clinical trials, they got to the point where they vaccinated 80,000 infants. And unfortunately, there were the outcome with polio and smallpox ended there. And out of those 40,000, or excuse me, out of 80,000 infants who were vaccinated, about half of them ended up in the hospital. And unfortunately, there were 2 deaths attributable to the vaccine. And so, as you can imagine, that put a halt to the vaccine development back then. And ever since then, we've been trying to find a vaccine. Now, fast forward to 2013, and a researcher by the name of McClellan at the NIH, he identified the cause of the trouble, and it was related to a F protein, a fusion protein on the surface of the RSV. And out of that, the race for a vaccine started all anew. the vaccination or the vaccine development now has over the last 8 years has gotten to the point where there are 8 different candidate vaccines that are available and in different phases of clinical trial, either phase 1, 2, or 3. And one of those candidate vaccines from Bavarian Nordic is actually in phase 3 development. And Be Well Clinical Studies is one of the sites here in the greater Austin area that is recruiting volunteers to participate in the final phase 3 study that hopefully will allow Bavarian Nordic then to go to the FDA and get approval for this vaccine and bring to a culmination this 60+ year effort to develop a vaccine against RSV. And so it is a call to action that I offer to anybody in the greater Austin area or beyond to consider volunteering to be part of the Bavarian Nordic trial as a way to push the vaccine development forward against RSV and perhaps be part of the solution there. And so with that, I'm just gonna conclude. I guess that was fairly quick, but I'd open it up to any questions or comments regarding any of the various topics that we touched on today.
Thank you, Mark. While we're sort of waiting for the rest of the group to kind of catch up, back under your blue zone thing, would you, at least for my benefit, do number 7, belong? Does that mean I need to go out and join every organization, or what does blue zone mean by belong?
Oh, I tell you what, let me go back and I'll put that up on the screen here.
Would you just do a summary on each one of them?
Oh, sure. Okay, so move naturally. That's the blue zone terminology for exercising. The reason that they chose move naturally is that the centenarians in the blue zones rarely go to the gym. They typically move naturally throughout the course of the day, walking, eschewing the modern conveniences of the automobile. They bicycle, they garden. That's the number one lesson. Purpose is, as I mentioned, the Nicoyans call plan de vida, a reason to get out of bed. And that can be anything from your loved ones having a job, volunteering, anything, hobbies, etc. But purpose is vital, as we saw from the clinical studies that I mentioned. And then downshifting is the vernacular for de-stressing. We know that stress is a cause for many of the chronic illnesses, heart disease, stroke, hypertension, diabetes. And by de-stressing one's life, by downshifting, you can significantly decrease the stress hormones that float around in our bloodstream every day. And we have ample evidence for the health benefits of de-stressing. The 80% rule comes from the Okinawans. And basically it means pushing away from the dinner table before you're full. The Asian habit or the Asian culture utilizes this. If any of you have had the pleasure of visiting any of your Asian friends and be sharing a meal, they will not allow you to clean your plate. If you clean your plate, that's a signal for more. So when you're done, one has to leave a little bit on the plate. And the 80% rule is a good one. And the medical science behind that is related to the mind-gut connection. The brain takes about 20 minutes to catch up to the gut once it's full. And we know that in that 20 minutes when we're sitting down for our last course, i.e. A beautiful cake or ice cream, it's very easy to indulge, and finding a way to avoid that would be and is beneficial. The plant slant is the centenarian term for getting most of your calories, not all of them, but most of them from a plant source. The centenarians in the blue zones are not, generally speaking, vegetarian nor vegan, but they do get 80–90% plus of their calories from plant sources. And I think everybody understands the value of a plant-based diet, and the medical literature is rich with the value of this in terms of avoiding many of the chronic diseases that that our modern day culture and the typical American diet presents. Wine at 5 is the culture of consuming red wine, typically with friends and family around a meal in the evening. And the benefits of red wine have been well documented, related to antioxidants, the primary one being resveratrol, but there's other agents in red wine that are also beneficial. And then Tom, you mentioned or asked about belonging. Do you have to belong to every club, every event? And the answer is no. Belonging in the Power 9 sense means participating in some sort of an organized religion or spiritual organization. And it doesn't matter what it is, meaning the centenarians in the blue zones participated as Christians, Buddhists, Muslims, Jews, etc. It doesn't matter, but they did participate and they attended weekly services. And so being part of something bigger than oneself, I think, is the primary message associated with belonging, number 7. And then number 8, loved ones first. And that is, I think, self-explanatory, but it's just the fact that the centenarians were largely surrounded by their families. And we do have mounting evidence of the value of being part of a family. Being married, for instance, is associated with longevity. And then lesson number 9, the right tribe. These centenarians in the blue zones were typically surrounded not only by their family, but their friends. And their friend associations were multifaceted, meaning these were friends that they could rely on in times of trouble, but then also when their friends needed help, it also was something that they contributed to, and I think probably contributed to number 2 as well, giving them a sense of purpose. And so anyway, there's a lot of great things to learn. And if you go to the Blue Zones website, each of these different lessons have pages devoted and less additional information that you can glean from the webpage.
Thank you. For those of you who know how to use chat, Beverly has given the link to the Blue Zone there that you'll have a little better ability to read it primarily yourself. While we're waiting for some questions, and I don't have anything that I can see questions on, I hope somebody has the whole screen. But Mark, and some of you have heard this, it's a catchy phrase, but it's catchy in internal medicine and family practice, that your zip code is more important than your DNA code for your health. And of course, that gives people in low income areas, but let's assume that I'm not rich and famous. Is it possible to do these things if I live in a bad zip code?
I think so. I think that just like with so many socioeconomic issues, it may be more difficult if you're lower on the socioeconomic pole. But with the right commitment, I think all of these things can be achieved no matter where you live. I've lived in North Dakota. That's where I grew up, and I've lived in Hawaii. And just for instance, moving naturally, lesson number one. I can tell you from direct experience, when I lived in Hawaii, I was more active than when I lived in North Dakota. And that may have been due to many other factors, but I know that the climate was part of it. Having 4 to 6 months out of the year frozen and making it more difficult to get out, as compared to walking out your back door and just putting on your slippers and going for a walk down to the beach makes a difference. And so it is something that one has to be intentional. One has to embrace these ideas. So for instance, on the moving naturally again, on my Blue Zones presentation, I oftentimes will put up the picture of my stand-up desk. And some of you may remember Don Rumsfeld. I think he's passed away now, but he was the former Secretary of Defense. And he was somewhat famous for his stand-up desk. And I've got a stand-up desk that has a treadmill attached to it. And that was one of the intentional ways that I got in my extra steps every day. And every one of these things can be more or less difficult depending upon where you live and who you are, what kind of personality you have. But no matter where you live, I think one can adopt these rules in your life and make it meaningful.
Great, thank you.
Dr. Bacars, we do have a question from one.
Please go right ahead.
Yes, so I'm just reading it off.
Identify who you are when you say hello, just because we don't have everybody on the screen.
This is Anne actually reading out of the chat box.
Okay, go ahead.
From Dan O. The question is there any research indicating that lifestyle factors prevent or minimize RSV the way they do for COVID-19?
For RSV, we don't have, I think the answer to that is no, or at least no that I'm aware of. RSV is a virus that almost everybody gets exposed to. Probably 95% of the population is exposed to within the first 3 to 4 years of life. And it is something that does cause significant illness in the infants and the children, but almost everybody survives, or most survive. And then that does confer natural immunity. But in terms of lifestyle making your risk later in life lesser or greater, I'm unaware of any of those factors that we can really point to.
Great, thank you for pointing. That was a very astute question there. One of my pet questions, and again, if anybody's, just raise your hand that I can't see. But for those of you who don't know, I'm a retired physician, so I'm hung up on some of these things. But as a geriatric doctor, and certainly brought out in my mind very well in the book Being Mortal, being aware of side effects of medications is really important. And we're not telling anybody to not take a pill that's been prescribed to you. But if it falls into a category that worries you, discuss it with your physicians. But are there categories of medicines that senior citizens just have to be aware of because of the side effects in your practice?
Yeah, there's actually several categories. The one that I'm going to mention first is the anticholinergics, and that probably is not a term that that most of the audience is aware of. But one of a lot of a lot of allergy medicines and medicines to treat gastrointestinal symptoms or cold and flu, for instance, might have anticholinergic effects. And the most common one is Benadryl. And Benadryl is an evil drug for anybody, in my mind, over about age 60, 65, 70, because of the anticholinergic effects and the way that it disrupts the gut and the nervous system. And so if there's one drug that I was going to advise the audience to avoid, especially if you're 70 or above, is Benadryl. And Benadryl will sneak up on you in many sleep aids. Anything over the counter that anything like Tylenol PM or ibuprofen PM, Advil PM. The PM part of it is typically Benadryl. I would advise avoiding that if you can, just because of the side effects that you may not be aware of. Another category that I'll mention real briefly is the non-steroidal anti-inflammatory drugs, the drugs like Advil, naproxen. Those drugs in the elder can be problematic for two big reasons. Well, three really. Number one is the risk of ulcers in the gut. Number two is the risk of affecting your kidney function. And then number three is a lesser problem in and of itself, but that's swelling. And it can cause swelling in the feet and ankles, and then the geriatrician or the doctor may not be aware of the underlying cause of it, and that can lead to a prescribing cascade. And where we then put you on a blood or a diuretic to get rid of the extra water, and then you end up falling and so forth. So anyway, be careful with the non-steroidals as well as the anticholinergics like Benadryl.
Since most of the labels don't say Benadryl, do you want to tell them what the generic name is for Benadryl?
Yeah, and
Diphenylhydramine.
yeah, Tom, go ahead. I'm blanking.
Right. My apologies. I apologize for it. On the label that he's talking about, it'll say diphenylhydramine, and that's basically Benadryl. So do be aware. One other category, again, you don't want to stop these drugs, but is drugs for leaky bladders, which is a lot of women are cursed with, but those are very anticholinergic also.
There's a question in this chat about what about steroids themselves?
Go right ahead, Mark. Thank you.
Yeah. Okay, so the non-steroidal anti-inflammatories, of course, are not steroids. The steroids come in two forms, and I'm not aware of any over-the-counter steroid available other than hydrocortisone in a very mild concentration topically. I don't believe there's any over-the-counter oral steroids available. And so the reason that that's important is that you would only take an oral steroid under the direction of your physician and under the prescription from a physician. And that's very important because the steroids are very prone to causing lots of different side effects and interacting with other medications. And so anytime you're being prescribed a steroid, the physician prescribing should be very attentive to not only your particular medical history, but also your medication history. And that is a good time for anybody going on a steroid like prednisone or Decadron, dexamethasone, cortisone, oral cortisol. Any of those medicines deserve a lot of questions from you to your physician.
And let me just add that steroids can be literally life-saving, like in an acute allergic reaction. So the real key, reinforcing what has been said, is dose and duration. So 3 days worth for a bad allergic reaction is probably pretty safe. 7 days is not, 10 days, whatever. But it's just, again, you may need it, but be sure that the duration is under the very much awareness. Let me answer one question, and then Joe Farley has something for you if you'll check your chat there, Mark. Anticholinergic drugs, think of them as things that are antispasm. They slow down muscle contraction. In the gastrointestinal tract, as Mark already alluded to, bentyl or dicyclamine, it just slows down spasm or contraction. It seems to help in like bladders that are leaky, as I mentioned, but its uses are when you think of something that's contracting or spasming. I don't think any of the muscle relaxants, skeletal muscle relaxants are anticholinergic, but think spasm in your gut, your bladder, that's what an anticholinergic drug is. And I hope that answers a little bit, but Joe Farley says, do the blue zone concepts cover not only living well, but dying well? I'm wondering about your view on death with dignity, whereby a person may choose to end their own life peacefully when their quality of life is no longer acceptable to them. Organizations such as Compassion and Choices are working on such issues, but our society seems slow to approve of such self-determination. You may or may not have a comment on that. Joe, it's certainly an astute question, but we're trying to stay alive, but comment on it if you would.
Yeah, the blue zones and the centenarians from the blue zones have not given us many lessons regarding dying specifically, the dignity of death. But I do have some personal views as a medical oncologist and as a geriatrician. Of course, you can imagine I've had the honor and privilege of being part of end of life for literally hundreds of patients and their families as they've gone through that dying process. And in my humble opinion, some of the best things that you can do now to prepare for a dignified death is to talk about it with not only your physician, but to do advanced care planning with your family. Have these conversations when things are calm and not under stress, i.e. Share with your family, share with your friends your views on end of life, what you would like your last days, weeks, and hours to look like. Rarely in a calm moment does anybody say, I hope that I die in an ICU hooked up to a ventilator and doing dialysis and IVs and catheters and all those things. And too often in American medicine, because we don't head up these issues, face these issues head on and talk about them, then we end up doing it in an emergency fashion at 2 o'clock in the morning in the emergency room or the ICU. And I tell you, that is the worst time possible to be addressing end of life issues. The best time is to be doing it in a calm setting with your family around a nice meal, sharing your wishes about what it looks like, and then taking that to your physician and asking him or her to codify it in the medical record with an advance directive, filling out the Texas MOS, the medical order for scope of treatment, declaring your desires for or against emergency resuscitation in the event of cardiopulmonary collapse. And so I don't know if that directly answers the question, Joe, but it is that's my impression about end of life care. If it's done properly, it's it's mapped out months or years ahead of time so that the desire and the goals of the individual are known and respected at that time.
Thank you. Yes, CCV actually has some information on the very question you asked, and you can contact that after. Last question here is, what do you recommend for bone loss problems? In other words, comment on bone health, and what do you do if you don't have as good a bone health as you would like, which of course, reinforcing to the males, women often get a bone density to test their osteoporosis every 2 years. It's very uncommon for a man to have that pleasure. So what are you going to do for the women in our audience who think they have osteoporosis, and how to prevent it?
So osteoporosis is a disease that is very, very common in the female population, but also the male population. And as Tom pointed out, oftentimes it goes unrecognized in men, but also women. It is something that the bone density examination helps to quantify an individual's skeletal mass and strength. And then based upon the results from a bone density examination, the recommendations can be anywhere from keep up the good work, i.e. your skeleton looks healthy, all the way up to adding vitamin D, calcium, and then there are multiple agents that are now available based upon lots of good research that has happened over the last 30 years. We've got multiple agents that promote good bone health. And those range from hormones to the bisphosphonates and others that will either slow down the loss of bone or actually promote new bone growth. And it's quite a detailed science. And so I'm not going to be able to give you a specific recommendation. In terms of a lifestyle recommendation, resistance exercise, i.e. Doing some sort of weight training, resistance so that your bone and skeleton is undergoing that resistance. Is a good way to promote good skeletal health. And so if you're walking every day, if you're getting your 10,000 steps, hallelujah, that's great. But you also may want to consider doing some sort of resistance training as well to promote good skeletal health. And that's something that all of us can do, whether we know our bone density or not.
One question that went along with that, would taking too much calcium cause any heart problems to your awareness?
So for the vast majority, too much calcium is hard to do. There are a couple of disorders that can be associated with excess calcium intake, but for most of us, that's not going to be an issue. But again, the guidance from your physician, along with chemistry monitoring, looking at your blood level results, looking at your protein stores, your calcium levels, and your vitamin D levels. All of those are important in calcium metabolism.
And Dr. Carlson would reinforce the fact that is with everything in medicine, this is an evolving subject. We started with pills to help rebuild bone. Now we have IV stuff you can take once every 6 months to a year. All that really needs to be worked out with your physician. But in general, the treatments as those outlined are well accepted and at this point in time, well proven. However, don't forget to ask your doctor about side effects from particularly these pills that rebuild bone. Not terrible ones, but just things you need to be aware of. I think yes, good. Mark, we need to just say thank you. You want to just briefly tell us where you're located? You get a 60-second commercial free time is what I'm really trying to tell you.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, we are, the Be Well Clinical Studies office is located in Round Rock. 16040 Park Valley Drive. And it's right there by Seton, or excuse me, St. David's Medical Center, Round Rock, off 620. So if anybody is interested in volunteering, not only for the RSV study, but other studies that are coming down the pipeline, we'd be glad to talk to you. And I think Anne put up our phone number, and we can certainly be found on the web under Be Well Clinical Studies and Be Well MD.
Great. Well, thank you again, and we appreciate, and we look forward to having you back in a couple of years and tell you how many of us live to 100. Thank you.
Okay. Keep up the good work. Be well.
Be well.
Thank you everyone for attending.